Good morning, this is Unit 5D7, and we're going to take a look again at solving trigonometric equations. So let's look at example 1, solved by graphing sine of theta equals 1/2. First, I'm just going to graph sine of theta, okay? Remember, sine are our y values, and this one starts at 0, and then goes up to 1, down to 0, down to 1, up back to 0. So this is sine, and it just keeps going. Forever. Sine goes infinitely. Okay? And we're going to see where is sine 1/2. Well, 1/2 is in between 1 and 0, so it's going to touch 1/2 wherever it touches this line right here. These intersection points are going to be where the solution will work. Right here will work, right here, but there's infinitely many because sine goes on forever. It's going to keep on going. So we're going to say, well, theta has infinitely many solutions, or sine of theta is equaling to 1/2 and has infinitely many solutions with every coterminal angle at this point right here is going to be, I think, 30 degrees. So if we draw our triangle, and this is 30, this is 1, 2, square root of 3, and sine is 1/2, opposite over hypotenuse is 1/2 at 30 degrees. So I'm going to say every coterminal angle 30 degrees is pi over 6. Pi over 6. Sine is also 1/2 right here. It's going to be right before this, which is, I think, like 5 pi over 6. Still going to be 30 degree reference angle. So this is going to be 5 pi over 6. Coterminal, remember, just means that we can go around again, and it's going to end in the same spot. On the other ones, it's going to be negative. So this one we don't want. We want the positive 1/2. Alrighty, so 2 cosine of x minus 1 equals 0. My first step is going to be to solve for cosine of x. So I'm going to add the 1 to move it to the other side. So I have 2 cosine of x equals 1, and then I'm going to divide by 2. And so I have cosine of x equals 1/2. Cosine is equal to 1/2 on the other side, so 60 degrees is adjacent over hypotenuse. So when x is equal to pi over 3 is 60 degrees, and right before, sorry, I should do that over here. So cosine is also positive in quadrant 4, and this reference angle is also going to be 60 degrees. So negative 60 will go the opposite way, 60 degrees. So this is 300, but we can say, if we go all the way around 300 degrees, is 5 pi over 3. Okay. So this is just going to be a little bit more of solving these equations. To solve example 3, I'm going to try to get all of my signs on one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add sine of x to move it to this side, plus sine of x. And in the same step, I'm going to subtract square root of 2, because I don't want that over there. I want it on the other side. So what I'm going to be left with is sine of x plus sine of x is 2 sine of x's is equal to negative square root of 2. Divide by 2. And we'll have x is equal to, sine is negative in quadrant 4 and 3, these two down here, because these are my y values. So I know that this is going to be 45 degrees, but my reference angle is 45 degrees. This is 4 pi over 4, so this one will be 5 pi over 4. 5 pi over 4. You guys can take a look at your unit circle. That'll help you. And sine is also negative square root of 2 over 2 over here. And if this is 8 pi over 4, this one will be 7 pi over 4. Check it out. Make sure I'm right. This one, see, cosines are on both sides again. So I need them to be on 1. 14 cosine of x and then it has a minus 5. I don't know, this is on the outside of the cosine of x, so it's not with the cosine. So I can combine these. What I'm going to do though is move all of the cosines to one side. Let's just subtract minus the 14 cosine of x, and then minus 14 cosine of x, and then move the 7 to the other side. So plus 7, plus 7. So 18 minus 14 will be 4 cosine of x is equal to negative 5 plus 7 is 2. And we're going to divide by 4. So we have cosine of x is equal to 2 over 4 is 1/2. So this is asking me where is cosine positive 1/2. Well, cosine are my x values, and x values are positive in quadrant 1 and 4. We already kind of talked about this. Cosine is 1/2 at 60 degrees. So in quadrant 1, that's just pi over 3. 60 degrees is pi over 3. But in quadrant 4, if this is 6 pi over 6, it's 1 less. So this one will be, or sorry, 6 pi over 3, it's 1 less. So it'll be 5 pi over 3. Okay. Check out your unit circle. This one, you're going to do pretty much the same thing, but we have a squared. So I want you guys to check this one, to see this. We're going to add 1 still to move it to the other side, same thing. So we have 4, and then sine squared x equals 1. I do have to divide by 4, same thing. But this time I have sine squared x equals 1 over 4, right? And I'm trying to get this by itself. So what I can do is I can actually take the square root of both sides. But whenever you take the square root of something, this has to be the plus and minus of this, okay? This will cancel. Don't worry, this one will just be sine of x. Then the square root of 1 is 1, but it's plus and minus. 1 over, the square root of 4 is actually a good number. It's 1/2, right? And we kind of just talked about this. Sine is 1/2. Sine is 1 over 2 at 30 degrees. So I know 30 degrees is pi over 6, but it can be positive and negative 1/2, so that doubles my chances. So x can be pi over 6. It can be 5 pi over 6. 6, sorry. It can be 7 pi over 6. I don't know why I put another equal sign. And it can be 11 pi over 6. So those count all the positive and negative times. It'll be positive or negative 1/2. Alright, I want you guys to try this one. Try. You know that this is going to be the same triangle, okay? It'll be square root of 3. And tell me, there's going to be 4 answers. Tell me the 4 answers. Let's try number 7. Ooh, this one has a sine and cosine, so I definitely want to try this. It looks like I have a sine in both terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out the sine. So I have sine of x, factoring out. So I'm dividing by it. So I'm left with a 2 and a cosine of x, and then a minus 1, and then equal 0, right? Now, since it's factored, we can set each term equal to 0. Where does sine of x equal 0? Those are answers. Also, when 2 cosine of x minus 1, the inside, equals 0. And this one we kind of already did. We're going to plus 1 to move it to the other side, and then divide by 2. So we're going to get cosine of x equals positive 1/2. Sine equals 0 at 2 spots. Sine are our y values, and it equals 0 right here on the x-axis. So this is when x equals 0 and pi. Now cosine equals 1/2 the adjacent and over the hypotenuse when your x is equal to 60 degrees. So that's pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. It's also positive 1/2. Okay, first and fourth quadrant. Let's take a look at these quadratic form, I guess, and identities. So this one is kind of the same thing because it has cotangent in both of them. So first I'm going to move this cotangent to the other side. Okay, I can't divide by cotangent, so you get rid of it. It's not a thing. So I'm going to have cotangent of theta cosine squared of theta minus 2 cotangent of theta equals 0, right? And I'm going to factor out the cotangent because it's in both. So I have cotangent of theta times cosine squared of theta minus 2, and then equals 0. Now I set each term equal to 0. So cotangent, where does cotangent equal 0? This is when it's cosine over sine. Cotangent is cosine over sine. So I'm looking at where cosine equals 0, right? Now this is cosine squared theta minus 2 equals 0. I'm going to add the 2 to move it to the other side. So I have cosine squared theta equals 2. Now I'm going to take the square root. And then this is when theta is equal to plus or minus the square root of 2. Now the thing is, the square root of 2 is, it's cosine of theta. So cosine is never going to be more than 1. It's a unit circle. It doesn't get bigger than 1. And I promise you the square root of 2 is going to be bigger than 1. So this is never going to happen. This is not going to be an answer, okay? So cosine of theta is never going to be the square root of 2. But this, cosine is 0 at 90 degrees. So cosine of our x values, and it's 0 right here and right here. So 90 and 270, which is pi over 2, when theta is equal to pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2. So this one only has 2 answers. This one is going to be pretty much the same thing. You guys can go ahead and try it out. Almost exactly the same. Go ahead and go to the next page. Okay, so this one is just saying solve by factoring. You might have to use the quadratic formula to factor, which I'll write up here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so make sure you know this formula. This one I think we can factor by ourselves. Let's try it first before we use the quadratic formula. So this is sine squared minus, 2 sine squared minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so I know that to get 2 sine squared x, that's going to be 2 sine of x and sine of x. To get negative 1, I know that's going to be 1 and 1. Now I need to look at the signs. So I know I have the negative and a positive to make this negative 1. So 1's negative, 1's positive, but I want the bigger one to be negative. Because when I FOIL it, it's going to be negative sine of x. So this is going to be a minus, this is one's a plus. And you can FOIL it just to make sure. So now I can set each one equal to 0. So I have 2 sine of x plus 1 equals 0. And I have sine of x minus 1 equals 0. These two. This one I have to like add 1 to move it to the other side. It's not hard. Where is sine equal to 1? Look at your unit circle. This one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to subtract 1 though to move it to the other side. And then 2 sine of x equals negative 1. And then I have to have one extra step. I got to divide by 2. So where is sine, our y values, equal to negative 1/2? So this one is negative 1/2 when x is equal to pi over 6. But negative, so that'll be 7 pi over 6. Check it out and make sure I'm right. And 11 pi over 6. Right before 2 pi. Now, sine is 1, positive 1 in one spot. That's going to be pi over 2. Tell me if I'm right, okay? Make sure. Alright, this one, let's try it. It's going to be the same thing. Let's try to factor it first before we use the quadratic formula, which usually we have to on these. So it could be 3 and 2, it could be 1 and 6. So I'm going to try 3 cosine of x and 2 cosine of x because this number is very small. And then 2 has to be 2 and 1. So I'm going to try 2 times 3 is 5 minus 2 is not 1. So it's going to be maybe 1 right here. So 2 and 1. So this will be 3, and then the inner one will be 4 minus 3 is 1. Perfect. And I want the bare one to be a negative. So when we FOIL it out, we get a negative. So minus 2 and plus 1. That's it. And that's equal to 0. Now if you FOIL this out, you should get this. Make sure. Now I'm going to do 3 cosine of x minus 2 equals 0, and 2 cosine of x plus 1 equals 0. And I have to plus 2 to move to the other side, and then I'll divide by 3. So I have 3 cosine of x equals 2, divide by 3. Cosine of x equals 2 over 3. This is not part of my unit circle that I know, but luckily we have a calculator that will do this for us. So all we have to do is put in the calculator, not x equals, put in the calculator cosine inverse of 2 over 3. As long as there's no domain error, it'll give you a good number, and I don't know what the number is going to be, so try it out. This one is 2 cosine of x. I'm going to minus 1. I have 2 cosine of x equals negative 1. So I have cosine of x equals negative 1/2. And this one I do know because it's my 30, 60, 90 triangle. This one is 60 degrees. So this is when x equals 60, but it's negative. So cosine is negative in quadrant 3 and 4. So this will be, in quadrant 2 and 3. So this will be 2 pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3. Okay. Alrighty, and then you guys can tell me this one. This one might have some too. Put that into your calculator. Okay, so this one, I'm just going to first solve for this. So 2x, this one's already solved for us, equals, where is tangent the square root of 3? Well, at, the square root here, let me make sure. Say 30. If this is 30, then this is 1, 2, square root of 3. And tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So tangent actually has to be 60 degrees. 60 degrees is pi over 3, and it's positive, so it is pi over 3. And tangent is also positive in quadrant 3, so 2x also equals 4 pi over 3, right? You guys okay with this? Now, the 2x equals this. So what we have to do is we have to solve for x. So I still have to multiply by 1/2 or divide by 2, same thing. Multiply by 1/2. Same on this one. Multiply by 1/2, divide by 2, multiply by 1/2. So this is going to be pi over 6 or 30 degrees. Actually, they want it in degrees, so I'm going to put it back in degrees, sorry. So this will be 30 degrees. And this one is going to be 4 pi over 3. This one is going to be 120 degrees. And then we're going to do every multiple of that. So you can find the other 2 multiples that will make tangent the square root of 3. Okay? This is the last one that I'm going to do today, because we're running out of time. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a wonderful day.